Good morning, everyone. Today, October 3rd, is the birthday of a lot of musicians. So this is your fun trivia for the day. Chubby Checker, Gwen Stefani, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Tommy Lee, India RE, Ashley Simpson, and one of my personal favorites, Keb Mo, all birthdays today. So I think this is a heavy music-centric day, apparently. So I would love to hear from you. Who is your favorite musician, album, song, as we go around and make introductions. And I also want to call out Captain Catherine Poley, her first meeting today. Welcome. She's going to be awesome on this group, and we're very pleased to have her with us. So, Mark, would you like to start with your favorite and your introduction?
Oh, goodness, well, that's a lot to wrap around this early in the morning, but so Mark Fairchild, Children's Commission. My favorite, I mean, I've got to go with Dylan for favorite artist of all time. There's just nobody that's done what he's done as far as songwriting and everything else in musicality, but I'm going to have a second round before I can think of album and song too.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jade Palin. I'm from the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute, and I'm going with Elvis Presley and Suspicious Minds because I have one.
Good morning, Nancy Weaver, Director of Youth Justice at the Indiana Office of Court Services. All-time favorite are Indigo Girls, and I did see Judge Felix at the concert this summer that Indigo Girls did. So he's also a girls fan. Any of their songs, and I could do a concert, not today, but if anybody's interested, I can sing about every one of their songs.
Another fun fact, Nancy, today is also Judge Felix's birthday. There you go.
Maybe I'll send him a song.
All coming together. Hi, good morning. I'm Catherine Pulley. I'm the Executive Director of Indiana Office of Court Services. I am new here, so thank you for allowing me to be here today. Currently, I'm very excited about a concert that I'm going to in French Lick on Friday, Toad the Wet Sprocket. It's my favorite band from college, and after, I don't know, Walk on the Ocean is one of their good ones, but I'm so excited. We got backstage passes and everything, so I'm very excited for this concert at French Lick.
So great. Blast from the 90s. I like it. Matt Alsma, Indiana University. Nice to see everyone. I like this old dad band, Wilco. I'm just getting older and older as I sit here.
Carolyn Foley, Allen Superior Court. There's frankly too many to mention, but I listened to Jimmy Buffett on my Sirius XM all the way down. So kind of in a Buffett mood today.
It's gonna be a fun day with Magistrate Bowling. Nicole Phillips, Bartholomew County Probation, Dave Matthews Band, anything they do live.
Good morning, folks. I'm late. I'm Darren Dolahanny, Senior Judge, and we're picking out our favorite artist, are we? Yeah. How about John Prine?
I love those pictures.
Stephen Balco, Indiana Department of Education. I think my favorite band changes probably by the month, depending on my mood, but I'll say right now, Black Crows have been up there.
Faith Graham from Tippecanoe County Juvenile Court, and I think my all-time favorite is If I Had $1 Million by Bare Naked Ladies. It's fun.
Emily Krauser from Housing, and Paul Simon's Graceland.
Amy Richardson from Huntington County. My favorite artist is probably Billy Joel. But I feel like I got some people in the room because everybody's saying things and I'm like, oh yeah, I like them too. I like this too.
I'm Marshall from Marion County Superior Court 7. My favorite music changes a lot too. I'd say right now Beastie Boys, and probably favorite song Sabotage or Eggman. So
I'm Ryan King, Ripley Circuit Court. Favorite artist Eric Church. Probably some favorite song Springsteen, or maybe Give Me Back My Hometown.
Oh my, I like all genres of music, but I have a connection with Stevie Wonder, so I would say Superstitions.
Terry Decker, Executive Director for Divisional Youth Services for the Department of Correction. I like all music, but I am so into listening to Teddy Swims right now.
Oh, me too.
Anything he sings. Oh, you got listening.
He's coming next summer.
Yes, I'm gonna be, yeah.
Joel,
No.
I don't even know who Teddy Swims is. I'm sorry.
Can't even sit next.
Joel Winnicky, Public Defender Counsel. You know, you mentioned one of my favorites, Stevie Ray Vaughan, RIP, him doing a Jimi Hendrix cover. Doesn't get much better than that. But about 2 years ago, I found this bluegrass band called the Wooks from Kentucky. And I think they broke up before I found them, but they have 3 albums that I have worn out on my Apple Music channel. So
Hey, I love everybody's musical choices. I love all music, but I guess I'd say my favorite band from way back is the Eagles, and I did get to see them, like the ones you think of as the Eagles, way back in the day from the 4th row. So it was wonderful. And I also have to mention Chris Christoph. She died. It's very sad. My favorite songwriter.
So for Magistrate Richardson, Billy Joel and Sting are coming to Lucas Oil February 8th. I bought tickets last night. I did. Yes. Yeah, and I would say that my favorite album of all time is my very first cassette tape that I ever got as a present, along with my new Walkman. And that was Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, yes.
So I would go actually with Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, of course, the single point.
Okay.
A good second choice.
All right, great. All right, so we've added a presentation. First, let's do minutes. So any edits needed to the minutes?
I have just, sorry,
Nancy?
I forgot my readers and I have readers in these, so I'm really sorry.
Thought you were picking up the rock star vibe this morning.
I tried to do this, and I'm like, I still can't see it. On page 4, in paragraph 1, there's a sentence that says they are reviewing the DCS assessment standards, and I think that's supposed to be service standards. And the only reason I picked it out is because DCS has assessments, right? I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I think
Thank
it's supposed
you.
to be service standards.
Thank you. Any other edits? If no further edits, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Jade, thank you. Second, yes, Magistrate Foley. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, minutes are approved. Next up, we had rave reviews from one of our work groups that had Bart Doan come in and present about youth services available through the Department of Workforce Development. So we asked him to come and share with the entire group today so that we're all aware of services that I think many of us have been unaware of. So, Mr. Doan, there you are.
Oh. This is way fancier than I'm used to.
Yeah.
I definitely saw this being recorded now, so a little pressure. So yeah, my name is Bart Doan. I'm the Assistant Director of Youth Initiatives with the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. And I'm going to chat with you for a little bit about some of the services that our agency has that, quite frankly, a lot of people don't really know anything about, which kind of surprises me, but I guess I've been in government long enough that I should know that it's siloed sometimes. But very hopeful that after this presentation, some of you contact me and say, yes, we have some young people that could really benefit from these things. Because I think at the heart of what we do on our youth initiatives team is we really care about the young people we work with. I would be considered an at-risk youth growing up, obviously not a youth anymore, very old, but you know, we really care and we want, and the other thing that I would say about a lot of this funding is it doesn't get used all the time. So it just kind of sits there. So let's get the kids some help. So I like to make things interactive. What is the current number of job openings in Indiana? Price is Right rules don't go over.
60,000.
102,000.
240,000.
We keep going up.
1.5 million.
1.5 million. 1,000. The number is 109,817. So, and that is a fairly consistent number. Did somebody say 100,000? I thought somebody said 100,000.
I said 102.
Okay, well, you win. And that's a pretty consistent number over the years. We usually have around 100 to 150,000 job openings in the state. And people don't really think about that, like how many jobs really are open in the state. And throughout this, we'll kind of go through some different misconceptions that people have about employment in the state of Indiana. But I'm even going to give you another trivia question before I jump into some of the resources. What is the average mileage that a Midwestern adult lives from their mother?
Oh, 15 miles.
There's a method to my madness, I promise. You said 8, 3? I heard 15. Okay.
30.
The answer is actually 14 miles. And that's consistent through the state of Indiana. And the reason I bring that topic up is because with all the youth that I go and travel around and talk to, and with all the young people that we work with, the reality is even after they go to college, even after they graduate high school, or whether they graduate high school or not, they are staying local. Okay. There's a lot of talk about brain drain and people leaving the state of Indiana, but the reality is the data does not support a lot of that. These young people are staying at home. They're staying in their communities. 70% of people born in the state of Indiana never live in another state. And we need to have opportunities for them. And one of the things that we see at the Department of Workforce Development is if Meyer and McDonald, I'm not disparaging these particular jobs, but from a pay scale and a livable wage scale, if it's fast food and it's retail, and it's a factory in town or things of that nature, no matter what they pay, these young people are generally staying there. They're not going anywhere else. So that makes it even more important to find some of the resources local to them to help them succeed. So I want to start out by talking a little bit about who the young people are that meet our program eligibility. I can send this out because there's a lot of words on there, but essentially all the young people that you're working with in the justice involved system are eligible automatically. That is a individual marker. I think I can see it down there. It's like the 5th one down. Individual subject to the juvenile or adult justice system in any way, any capacity officially. So you know, there are all those other categories that we can help young people get our services, but all the young people that we're talking about today, everything we talk about today, they qualify for. So this would be a little tough for me to see, I think. So some of our program elements are that overview of what goes on in our program. We can work with folks on labor market and employment information for their areas. We offer paid and unpaid work experiences. I'll go into a little bit of what that is a little bit later on. We offer occupational skills training. We work with young people on financial literacy, how to balance a checkbook, how to buy your first car. What does your first mortgage look like? What does paying rent look like? A lot of these things that young people are getting out of even high school and saying we don't necessarily know how to do these things. We're always focused on helping young people transition either to post-secondary or some sort of employment training or entrepreneurial skills training. So that last marker down there that says 20% WEX requirement, we live in acronyms in the Department of Workforce Development. It's just acronym soup. WEX is work experience. And that essentially, I'll talk a little bit about it later, but it's sort of a state subsidized program for young people to get their first job.
What is the WIOA?
Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That's federal legislation where most of our workforce funding comes down through. So I have a link in here as to where the work ones are. The work ones when you hear the word work one, how many, just by a show of hands, how many have ever heard what a work one is? And by a show of hands, how many of you associate work one and DWD only with unemployment? So not as many. That's good. We're making some progress here. It used to be that when I said that, all the hands would go up. That we were just the unemployment agency. But the reality is it's cheesy, but I call it the reemployment agency, because a lot of what we do in those work ones, which are American Job Centers, are focused on getting people back to work. We don't do any unemployment anymore out of the work ones. So if you're working with someone that needs unemployment services, yes, our agency does handle it, but they don't handle it in those particular facilities. The biggest problem in terms of work ones and youth is what you can probably expect. Young people aren't banging down the door to go into a government office, okay? Especially if it's a government office where their parents think it's an unemployment office. So getting young people to understand these resources is vital and important. I left a link on there for everyone. We have them all across the state. We have full service and kind of partial service locations. All the full service ones will have a youth case manager, a dedicated youth case manager. Some of the satellite sites that are only open 3 days a week in some of our smaller communities, they'll have a youth case manager. They just won't be open those 5 days a week. So they can have somebody that can get out there, or you can meet, young people can meet virtually too. We do have those options. So work one, when you enter a work one or send a young person to a work one, because we're focused on youth today, there's 2 buckets of services that young people can access. There's basic services. You can go into a work one. And when I started working at the agency many, many years ago, I worked in a work one, and there was a gentleman that would come in at 8 in the morning. He would get on the computer until 4:30 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. And occasionally job search, occasionally do fantasy football and other things, but you can be there that amount of time is sort of the impetus for that story. And it's free. There are workshops that you can adhere to and go to, the resume building, cover letters, down to some of them have how to appropriately use social media. Some of them are basic skills assessments and things of that nature. So we do have those sort of basic services that you don't need to sign up for anything to do a basic service. So that's when you put them into 2 buckets. One, you have to sign up for some things. The basic services you don't. When you get into the individualized services a little more, that's where you're talking about actually working with a case manager. So we have case management for adults. We have them for young people. We have them specifically for our veteran population. And that's where you're really sitting down and going through the meat and potatoes of what's going to make you successful. Yes.
Or child services for kids?
That's a great question. I would say yes and no. So we do get referrals from our IDOC youth facilities. Every single young person that comes through those facilities gets the opportunity to meet with someone at one of our work ones. We connect our staff with the information from IDOC. But that's the extent of it. Not every young person through probation do we get referrals. We'd love it. Certainly. Send them our way. Obviously they're qualifying. So the individualized services include career planning. Somebody can simply help them with employment and job search. I just need help building a resume and I just need help finding a job. They can do that there. If they're interested in some sort of training, there's a training you can sit down and kind of flesh out from a training perspective where you want to go. Do you want to do HVAC? Do you want to do welding? Do you want to do ASC certification? Are you interested in something completely different? And then there's a mentoring piece to it as well. And we really try with the young people to make sure that they're going to be somewhere that's successful. I always joke when I was a youth case manager and I was just starting out, I would work with a lot of young ladies and they all wanted to be CNAs because they thought it was Grey's Anatomy. And they found out real quick after doing the interviews and doing job shadowing. I'll never forget one girl. She was dead set on being a CNA. She was really bright. She was on her way and everything. She came back and she said, I didn't realize there was poop involved. And we found something else for her. She's pretty successful now. But that we do try to make sure that it's not just, hey, here's a job for you on your merry way and let us know how things went. When they do engage in a training program, even if they're successful, we found Billy a $25 an hour welding job. Fantastic. We still follow up with Billy for a year to make sure Billy's successful. So the complete process for signing up for our services, let's say you send a young person there and they're interested in getting help. The complete process is they'll fill out an application with their career counselor. And then well, first they'll find their office, then they'll kind of fill out an application, then they'll get enrolled, and then they'll start whatever path they're on. It's a fairly simple process. We don't make it very difficult. It's not very painful. So there is a video on here that you can watch and look at when I send the PowerPoint. We're not going to spend like 3 minutes watching a video. That's not a good use of your time, but you can, we made a video to kind of show people, hey, this isn't some big scary place that you have to go in. There's going to be somebody that's going to greet you. There's going to be somebody, there's a little kiosk that they type in why they're there and that type of stuff. But you know, if a young person is a little bit apprehensive about going in because it is kind of a stuffy looking government office, sorry, work one, but they just are. Then this video will hopefully help the young people feel a little more comfortable about where they're going. And there we go. So in terms of basic qualifications to get services, everybody in this room can walk in a work one right now and get services if they want. If you feel like your resume is not up to snuff, if you feel like maybe you're just interested in going to some sort of workshop, everybody, just the basic qualifications for services is be a U.S. citizen, and if you're a male, selective service application. And then there'll be different factors that determine eligibility for each program. But again, for the population that we're talking about right now, these young people all are eligible. And just like I said, just an overview, if you have some of these other populations that are people in your lives that could use our services. We do serve veterans. We do serve the unemployed. We have a class for folks who are on unemployment that they come into. They get career coaching in a group setting, and then they meet with a career counselor and sort of get on a path for how to get off unemployment, because it doesn't last forever. Or somebody that's simply a career changer. You know, if you know somebody that just needs some help getting out of a career that they don't want anymore, Work One can be a place for those folks too. It's important to note that when we talk about young adults, we're talking about the federal definition. So that is age 16 to 24. A 24-year-old probably doesn't consider themselves to be a youth. But for our programming, they do. That means if they jump in at age 24 and they don't leave our programming till age 27, they are still eligible for all of our services as long as they enroll at that age 24. Okay, as long as they enroll at that age of 24. I want to talk a little bit about the work experience section. So I spoke on it a bit earlier, but the work experience is essentially a program for our young people where 20% of the funding that goes to our 12 economic growth regions for youth funding needs to be spent on work experiences. So they are essentially the best way I can put it is to give you an example. I worked with a young lady who was a dropout because she was bullied at her school, and we helped get her high school equivalency a couple of years ago, and she wanted to be a dental assistant. So we got her training to be a dental assistant through a program at the time that she qualified for. And then we got her what was called a work experience. So she was hired at a CVS to be a pharmacy tech. And she was hired for 6 months. It's up to 180 days, our work experiences. And the Department of Workforce Development will help subsidize her salary and her wages for that period of time while she gets that on-the-job training. And then afterwards, the employer has the opportunity to say, yeah, we're excited to keep this student on. The student might say, well, you know, it's good, but I'm glad I have work experience, but I'd like to move in another direction. Or that student or it just doesn't work out between the two. But this young person comes away with work experience, and the employer comes away with the opportunity to train someone without having to pay for it from beginning to end. So I'm not done quizzing everybody. So take a guess at how many of Indiana's 50 most in-demand jobs require a career-specific certificate. This isn't necessarily a degree. This is a degree and or a career-specific certificate.
17.
Good guess.
40.
What'd you say?
30.
30? You said 40? Anybody else? We have two really close answers. So Price is Right rules, it's 39. So but that sort of underscores the fact, and a lot in Indiana are career specific certificates. You know, we think of the 2 and 4 year degree. There's only around 50% of young people that even go into or consider that traditional post-secondary role. And there's only around 30% of them right now that are actually staying in school. So when we really think about how to get young people to be successful, guiding them to, I wish somebody would have taken me by the ear and said, well, my mom tried, I just didn't listen. I love you, Mom. But looking at the jobs that are in demand, and then what does it take to get those jobs? So our young people might think, oh, I'm going to go get a 4-year degree in graphic design, for instance. I've heard that a lot over the years visiting schools and classrooms. Where are you going to get a job in graphic design? Well, I don't know, in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Okay, how many of those jobs are available? Or I'm going to go out to Arizona and be a graphic designer. But then the reality hits, like that statistic I told you earlier, see, it all intertwines together. Bobby might get that graphic design degree, but realizes I don't really want to go to Arizona, or I don't really want to go to Chicago, or I don't want to go where the graphic design jobs are, and then has a degree that Bobby's not really using, right? So, but if we could get young people to understand these are the jobs that are in demand, that are going to pay you well and are in your area, it really will help our young people in a lot of ways. So some of our work and learn initiatives that we have, work and learn is always a hot button phrase. Our Jobs for America's Graduates, which I'll go into here in a little bit. How many of you have heard of JAG Indiana? Okay. I got a lot of work to get the word out on that. We've talked a little about our WIOA out of school program and our young adult services. We've talked about our employability skills programming. The agency does have an Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship. And we really leverage a lot of our community partnerships when we are working with young people. Best example I can give is I had a young lady years ago, and it's the only time I ever cried at work in front of a client. But she came in and she's talking about, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. And then she just stops and starts breaking down. And I was like, well, what's going on? And she said, well, I need something now because my boyfriend shot at me and my 3-month-old last night, like bullet holes in the wall. And at that point, it doesn't become like, cool, you want to be a welder, let's find you a welding job. At that point, it becomes, let's get you somewhere that you can at least be safe tonight in the next couple of weeks. We got her in a local shelter. They took her in immediately so she could get out of that situation and then focus on the workforce stuff. Getting a job is the most important thing in the world. Being safe and having your family be safe are the most important things in the world. So when you walk into a work one, it's not just, it shouldn't be just solely, hey, we're going to find you a place to work or find a place for school. It should be, we're going to find you something to make you sustainable, successful, and give your life some hope. There's JAG. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about JAG Indiana. JAG Indiana JAG stands for Jobs for America's Graduates. That text is way too small to see. I understand that now, seeing it up there. But essentially, JAG is our in-school program. Okay. JAG is our program for young people primarily who are in high schools or middle schools now, who their school deems to be not on a path to success. And it's sort of a how to do life class in school. So whereas I took journalism or wood shop as an elective in school, students have the opportunity to take JAG. They'll learn resume building, they'll learn service learning. They have to do a certain amount of service learning. They'll learn how to fill out job applications. They'll go on college visits. They'll have to do public speaking. They'll have to do career prep. All those things that we probably think that we didn't get in high school, it comes through in this class. So another trivia question for you. What percentage of employers say that high school graduates and college graduates are not prepared for the basics in the world of work?
97. Sorry,
97. No, that's a good guess. It's 70%. It's 70%. And the interesting thing about that is when you poll young people, around 65 to 68% on a rolling average say that they don't feel prepared when they get out of school. for the basics of the world of work. So very rarely do we have everybody in agreement on an issue, on a topic. Now it's just, okay, we all agree, but how do we fix it, right? And JAG sort of fixes that. These young people are prepared to hit the workforce, or they're prepared for school when they get out. And the unique thing about it is there's an advisory committee in the school that says these kiddos are not on a path to success, whether it's academic success, whether it's they're really smart, but they just don't have any goals after school, whether they don't have realistic goals, whether they are justice involved, maybe students have a 504 and IEP. All these kiddos are in this class. And what I love about it, there's two things I love about it. One, it's real life. Like when you get out of your bubble and you go to work, you're going to work with people that aren't necessarily your friend group, that aren't necessarily the people that you want to hang out with after work. I think we all have had a job at some point where we've had at least one or two people that probably we wouldn't want to share a coffee with in a social situation, right? And this class really brings all those kids together under one umbrella, helps them be successful. And learn those skills. And the graduation rates, Governor Mitch Daniels brought this program here in 2006 to address the dropout situation in Indiana. Since 2006, the graduation rate for these students is 95%. So there's kids coming in that you're saying they're not on a pathway to success, and then they're graduating at a 95% clip. I would say that's pretty good. So successful has the program been that Governor Pence doubled it in 2013. Governor Holcomb has actually sat on has been the president of our national board, and he charged us with doubling the program by 2025. So that's a great question. We're in over 170 high schools and middle schools across the state. And there are over 200 programs. So we're almost at that 250 goal. But if you have a high school in your area that doesn't have this program or doesn't know about it, send them my way. We will get them one. So Governor Holcomb has to expand it by 250 to 250. So that's doubling it from the 125 that it was by the time he leaves office. So we're full steam ahead at that. And he wants it done that way because this works. And he recognizes that works. His office recognizes that works. So it's a wonderful program. And, please reach out if you have some schools that might have a need for it. So I'm going to close here with a little online resources. I try to make it simple and that you can pass along to folks. If I'm looking for a job, where do I go? If I want to know what jobs are open in my area, where do I go? If I'm a high school student and I need help, where do I go? So on and so forth. So, and then my last is, if any of you are on social media, please feel free to follow the agency, or you can follow JAG Indiana, which is I oversee those accounts for the most part. I'm kind of old for Instagram, so I'm not as good at that, but the other ones are all right. So please feel free to follow those, reach out and ask like, hey, what's going, where's the JAG program near me? Where can I go visit? Or you might want to guest speak. They have guest speakers in from employers, from government agencies. I go in and do suicide prevention roundtables with the students. They're great kids. They all are interested in what you're doing. We have politicians that go in. We have congressional people that go in. We have judges that go in, police officers, military folks, anyone and everyone. The kiddos are always interested in hearing about those things. So at this point, I will stop jabbering and I will take any questions if anybody has any. And if not, I'd either did a really good job or a really bad job. All righty. Well, please just reach out if you have any questions on anything, and I am always glad to help. We want to get these young people successful, and you guys are often the key to an audience that otherwise wouldn't be able to access our services. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
So how many have wheels spinning thinking, where else should Bart come talk in my community, or which high school should we connect them with, or, Justice Services Conference, all sorts of venues, because this is great information and it's available now. So thank you very much, Bart. Mhm.
Glad to help anywhere I can.
All right, next up, we have Mark to give us an update on the Best Youth Initiative.
All right, morning, everybody. So I just want to give a quick update. I think actually most of you have been hearing from me quite a bit lately about the Best Youth Initiative, but I want to make sure everybody's in the loop as well. So again, this is the national initiative the state was chosen to take part in. It'll be a 3-year project with the Forum for Youth Investment. Happy to say we had our first round of really digging into what's going on in Indiana over the last couple of weeks. We did a set of interviews where they challenged us to keep them busy the whole time. I'm glad to say that we kept them busy from about 8 in the morning to about 8 at night every single night. That they were in town. They conducted about 30 key informant interviews, went to different groups. I think about half the people in this room actually were either interviewed or a part of that. I know we had Judge Keen's group talking to them as well. Our public defenders, prosecuting attorneys, the courts, Department of Education was very involved there as well. So great to see. We don't have initial findings for you yet because they've told me they have about 180 pages worth of notes that will take some time to distill and go through. But really, it's always a proud day for me when they can see how engaged we are on an issue. I think a lot of times when we have some of the national groups coming in, they're seeing Indiana as a bit of an enigma. We're not necessarily on their version of the national scene. We're the only Midwestern state that's involved with this initiative, and they didn't really know what was going on. So you come in with some preconceived notions about silos and groups not working with each other and knowing each other, and they left with quite the opposite impression. By the end, they were asking if I staged it because the groups at the end were talking about everybody's efforts from the beginning. And they all seem to know each other and be well connected there. I said, well, no, that's how we do it here. We work well in that space. So a lot of good early findings from them from what they discovered there, that we have good programs, that we're actively engaged, but also that we know that we need some help with making sure we have funding for a lot of communities to be able to get different programs going on the ground. Getting the model programs to those places and having the technical assistance they need to get those all in place and working well. I can say that, not to take away from Jade's presentation, but one thing that came up very often was the Youth Justice Oversight Committee and the grant funds that we're working through as well. So the awareness of that is really going up, that's a tool. Specifically, as we were talking about our key issue of truancy, a lot of intersect there of what can we do to fund these programs to get the best practices that we're seeing across the state to local communities. And they were already saying, boy, this seems like a great way to do that and work with some of our different entities and our youth service bureaus and through JDEI and some of the other partners to really get that moving along. So a very fruitful start to that. Late this month, we'll have round 2, which will be a set of focus groups of youth and parents with experience within state systems and with the issue of truancy. Those will be online focus groups. And we are keeping with our mission by making sure those are compensated as well. So if you have a parent or a youth group that you think should be represented as part of one of those focus groups and want to connect a youth or two into that, let me know. Blaine is actively looking to get those set up. There will be limited slots, but we can say that there'll be about an hour to an hour and a half in duration, and compensation will be $50 for participants. So we, again, try to be very respectful that our lived experience folks are giving us professional expertise, just of a different type, and we want to make sure we're taking care of them as a result. We're also building an advisory board on persons who have lived experiences as well, that does have slots left for maybe another youth or two, and definitely another parent voice if you know somebody who's active and looking at that. And again, the Forum for Youth Investment has a compensation package available for that as well. So really just giving you that initial snapshot of where we're at and that we're moving ahead. This is a 3-year initiative, so we've got some time to go. The next step I'm taking is we do have a letter prepared from the YJLC and from the Children's Commission jointly saying that we're working on this together, that we have membership engaged and active in the issue of truancy. That'll be submitted to the Interim Committee on Education. That's looking at the issue of student attendance and chronic absenteeism right now. Again, making sure that they're aware that we've got a lot of stakeholders actively involved and engaged in this issue. Anybody that attended or watched that committee can know that that ran for about 4 hours straight with all kinds of groups coming to talk about what they're doing. So I think this is the first time I've seen an issue this actively engaged at all levels, from the grassroots all the way up to upper administration. So we've got a good opportunity there. And we've got a good opportunity for it to be an entry point into discussing all of the other needs that these families and youth have, right? Truancy and most of our status offenses are indicators. of something else that we can be helping with better. And I don't know a judge that's ever said, I love it when I get truancy cases in front of me, because they know there's something that could have been done sooner, something that can be done better in their community, and they want to have that done. So really, I'm here mostly today to say congratulations for a great start on that initiative. We've already been told that Indiana is really the way we put it together, and the way we're concentrating on the issue is model practice for the rest of the states that are involved in their initiative. So we always like to hear that, because sometimes we think we're just grasping at straws, trying to figure out a way to stay ahead of an issue. And, you know, certainly we've got a long way to go, but our starting point is far ahead of where a lot of other states are. So everybody in this room can be commended on that. We're probably looking at a full report of the initial landscape analysis sometime in January. So maybe we look at the February YJOC meeting, get a presentation on that, and really digging in a little bit more. Lastly, if anybody has any further groups that they think we should talk to that we haven't talked to yet, whether it be model program stakeholders, a legislator that's highly attached to the issue, please feel free to make that connection with me, and we can still make sure they get into one of those key informant interview slots. We're doing that throughout this entire month still for any folks that need to do that and need to do that remotely. We can certainly make that happen. So open for any questions.
Maybe a happy accident that those agenda items were back to back. You hear a 95% graduate rate with the JAG program, and then we're talking about chronic absenteeism on the other hand. So maybe a good connection there. All right, we'll move right into our work group updates. You've received the written reports, but I would like to hear from our chairs what you've been up to, starting with grants. Will that be you, Jade?
It will be.
All right. Either place. Grab your.
I'm gonna borrow his laptop. So I told him earlier today I was technologically incompetent, so please bear with me. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Okay, I am here on behalf of Devin, who is in Idaho hunting elk. So hopefully he is in the mountains somewhere enjoying himself. But basically the YJOC grants work group met, and not a lot of things have changed since the last time. We reviewed grants. There were only a few grants that went through our Board of Trustees for CJI at the last meeting. Those were approved. The group has not met again since then. However, the RFPs have been reopened and are available on our website until November 15th for applicants. So if you know someone who's looking to be funded, they have until November 15th to apply. And the RFPs are all on our website. There is going to be a webinar for both the planning grants and the regular grants. And those are happening, I believe, October 18th. And that information is also on the website. Our agency has hired a new youth division director. Renee White is no longer with us. And so we have hired Ellen Sheets, and Ellen is here today. She started Monday, so birth by fire here. Ellen has been with CJI for about 8 years, and she has a lot of grant experience. So I think she will be a big asset to the youth division. She's already busy working and meeting with some of our subgrantees who are struggling. So we're making some progress there. But she will probably be reaching out to folks to introduce herself and just kind of get to know all the players. And if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to Ellen as well at our office. Regarding other things for the work group, we don't really have any subgroups that have been created, so we haven't done any of that. And the next meeting will be when we review the grants again, most likely. And I don't believe that there is a meeting scheduled at this point, but Devin and Judge Shine would reach out when we do need to have a meeting. The other thing is Devin has met with, most of you in this room are familiar with the youth service bureaus. David Westenberger, he went over to David's office and met with with him about the funds. And then he participated in the Youth Service Bureau's quarterly meeting where he was online to kind of give them a brief example about things that could be used with the dollars. And the intention is for him to go and speak live at their next quarterly meeting, which I think is in December. So we're hoping to get all the youth service bureaus in the state on board. They serve this population. They really should be applying for these dollars, and we really want to encourage them to do so. I think David's on board. We just need to get the local folks involved. So that's on Devin's radar. Then the last thing I wanted to share with you is what's on the screen. If you go to CJI's website, we have created what we're calling dashboards. And if you go to, it's www.cji.in.gov/research, then you come to this page and scroll down under YJOC youth funding, and you can see these areas. And we've created these dashboards, and if my technology skills work, maybe not. There. So we've created these maps, and you can see this is the diversion funding. You can scroll over to any county. So for instance, Marion, they have a population of greater than 50,000, and you can see the amount of funds that have been awarded in Marion County under this funding stream and how much is left. And you can do that for any county in the state.
I have a question. Does it tell you who got the money, Jay?
It does not.
Okay.
It just, because these are the collaborative ones with it, it doesn't list it, it just lists the amount. And we'll add to this every time new groups are funded. There is a dashboard for planning as well as diversion and community alternatives. And we're working on one for behavioral health. And it will list who the grantee is because it's a little bit different. It's not based on the population, if you'll recall. So it just shows right now the amount and what's left. So you'll see up here, for instance, Steuben County under diversion, no funding has been awarded in that county. So we're working on them. They're kind of you can see them now. You can go out there. Hopefully behavioral health will be out there in the next week or two. We're in the process of working on that. But sometimes folks have been asking, like, how do I know if all the money in Marion County is gone? Or how do I know how much is left for a county? You can go here and see it. And hopefully this will provide information. We're also always looking to make improvements. So Tracy, I don't think it's a bad idea to maybe see if we can add in the future, Boys and Girls Club of whatever got money.
I just got a lot of questions and I don't know. So I'm just like, maybe there's a place they could go later that'll help them figure out what's going on in their counties.
So if not youth related, but on this web page as well, there are other funding streams within CJI, for instance, VOCA funding, which you guys probably all know about. You can actually see who's awarded on that dashboard. So it's something we can add here. We just have not done so. I'm open to questions, but that's about all I have. All right, thanks everybody. And I appreciate the assist.
So welcome Ellen. So if you didn't see Ellen, give a wave. So you'll be very popular to everyone in this room shortly. Two follow-up items for the grants work group, and that is, I know there's been discussion of this legislative language, the tweaks that we had talked about previously to fix the administrative use of funds issue in the behavioral health category to make the language consistent, and then also working on a proposed funding formula change to open up funds that aren't being accessed by counties across the state. So we'll look forward to hearing more on that going forward. And I do want to say that at the Dual Status Summit, thank you to Joel and his group for putting that on. It was a multidisciplinary audience of a couple hundred. How many attendees?
Not quite, almost. Yeah.
So multidisciplinary, as I said, from across the state, and I was able to pitch the grants again. And someone in the audience, a guardian ad litem, raised her hand and said, you know, there's this interactive map online. You can go on there and click on your county and find out how much money your county has received. So thank you very much, Jade, for putting that together on your website. And it's already been accessed by at least one person that I know of. So excellent work. All right, next up is data. So Dr. Alsma.
Yeah. Morning, everyone. So you can see kind of a list of some of the things that we've been working on. So a quick summary. We had a subgroup kind of work through our work plan and come up with kind of a Gantt chart timeline of what we want to do over the next 2 years because it's fairly ambitious. So we have a good idea of what we need to do and when we need to do it. So that was really helpful. And if you remember, we put out a request to counties to be part of our data validation pilot sites. Chris had this great idea of sending out the email with a newsletter. I didn't think it would work. It worked awesome. So again, shout out to Chris for that idea. So we have 24 counties that have said that they would like to be a part of that process. It's a nice mix of rural, urban, suburban, folks that use different information systems with Quest, SRS and the like. So that's super helpful. That's what we want. So we're getting in the process now of building out what it'll look like to do the data validation work. So looking at missingness, looking at data inconsistencies, really doing a lot of processing, having that happen, and then do a deeper dive with 5 or so counties to see about improving that data quality. So again, it'll be a multi-step process. It's going to take some time, but we have a good plan in place. So yeah, we're thankful for that. And then we talked about what elements of the data are really needed for evaluation purposes. We all have ideas of what we would ideally have pie in the sky to understand how a youth is processed through the system and how to improve that process. But then we kind of bump up against reality of the data that we have in hand. So had a good discussion about what's available, what do we need, and how do we get to a space where every county is using data to inform data-driven decision-making to help youth. And then how can we get to a place where we understand at a state perspective how youth are being processed through the system to really improve outcomes. So had a good discussion about that. And then our last discussion was really how can we tie cases to outcomes? So that's where we're going to be looking to see how can we really understand where a youth in Steuben County that is diverted or placed on probation, what happens to that case and the outcome of that case, it's kind of hard to get to. So how can we do that, have these cases and outcomes linked better to really look at that outcome? So we had a robust discussion, multiple paragraphs long, if you want to see that, where we really don't want to put too much burden back on counties for that. And what can we do on the technology side to really make those links? So that's going to be part of the process of what we do to really understand how youth are being processed through the system. So yeah, so our next meeting is coming up next week. Any questions about any of that process, clarifications from members of the team? Yes.
I just had one question about the report. In terms of the MOU, it says that it was a 2.5 year period from 1/1 of 24 to 6/30 of 24. And that's only 6 months. So I'm just wondering, what would be the start and dates of that?
It would not be just 6 months. Yes, that must be a typo. Yep, it'll be 2 years.
Okay.
2.5 years, as I look to Lisa for
Does
clarification.
it go back to, does it go back to 1/1 of 24?
1/1 of 24.
Okay.
To
6/30 of 26.
6/30 of 26.
Thank you.
Good clarification. Stop. Are there questions? I'm sure there will be questions as we go forward, and maybe we'll be working with some of your counties around that data validation piece. We're very thankful that there was this robust group of people that wanted to be a part of that. It's really fantastic. Good. Thanks so much.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Alsma, and thanks to Chris for that great idea. Who knew that if you say data, judges would jump up with their hands in the air? Yes, me, data. So I'm proud of our courts for jumping in. Screening and assessment.
It's
don't
me,
have-
Judge Kinworthy.
Thank you.
Shannon is out today, so she asked me to cover this for her. I do sit on the Screening and Assessment Committee. Michelle, jump in here at any time if I miss something. So we met on September 13th and we are review the work on our current priorities. Our main priority right now is updating some of this reports, the standard preliminary inquiry report, so that it fits with recommendation number 5, which is sharing screening and assessment results, as well as making sure that there's statewide utilization of the proper assessment tools. While we were doing that, we decided to go ahead and do some work on the predispositional report and the modification report so that all the information that we were doing in the preliminary inquiry is incorporated into those reports as well. So this subgroup has completed that. I think those documents were attached to the report for everybody to review. We have been working with court technology on that. Lisa, Michelle, myself, and Mariah Anderson from Tippecanoe County and Kara Snively have also been meeting regularly to review those reports and get feedback. It has been presented to the Judicial Conferences Bench Book Committee, the Probation Committee, the Juvenile Justice Improvement Committee, and the Probation Officers Advisory Board, and the Judicial Conference Board of Directors also received an update and overview at their September meeting from Michelle. So we have asked that those groups review everything and give us feedback in a couple of different ways. They can email Michelle or Lisa any feedback, and you all too, after you review it, if you have feedback, please feel free to email Michelle or Lisa. And then we are holding an office hours tomorrow from 11 to 2 via Zoom that all of those committees have gotten links to, so that if they have feedback, they can come online and give us that feedback. And then our subgroup will meet again next week to review any of that feedback and how we can incorporate it into those reports. And then we are also working with the Education Committee for IOCS on how we can provide the best training for stakeholders throughout the state and how they can help us do that. So I think that's it. Anything I miss? Any questions? Nancy?
Sorry. In terms of the changes to the reports, I appreciate all that information. Does the changes to the preliminary inquiry itself require any statutory changes? Aren't there statutory requirements for what has to be included? No?
I don't think it. We're not taking anything away from the preliminary inquiry. We're adding everything to it.
Okay.
To ease in sharing assessment results and making sure, so like there's a drop-down menu for the diversion tool. And if you don't use it, if you didn't do the diversion tool, then you have to give a reason why in the report. So that's not included in there now. You just click a box that says no risk assessment done.
Okay.
So it's really enhancing it, not taking anything out of it.
Yeah, I thought there was a statute that laid out what had to be included in a preliminary inquiry, but I was mistaken.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you.
Nancy, I think I can supplement that a little bit. The current preliminary inquiry report, all of those things meet the prior statutory authority. The statute that changed was about sharing those assessment information more readily. So making those required fields, enhancing the information that's collected. So stakeholders have that information sooner versus it being optional at that point. So that's the change that most happened in 1359, but all the other statutory requirements have long been part of those reports. Those reports are required to be approved by the Judicial Conference Board of Directors to be standard across all probation departments in the state. So we always work to meet all of those new requirements.
And putting a couple of pieces together, data and screening and assessment, we've been communicating with our legislators to make sure that as the data collection system is structured, it's on par with what they're expecting to be collected and making sure that we are speaking the same language. So there's some language around the IAS detention tool override. And what does override mean? Who is the overrider? Is it the probation officer or is it the court? So that's been discussed in a couple of different contexts. So we're working on back and forth communication to make sure that we understand and are on the same page going forward before we ask Lisa to create $1 million or more data collection system. Any further discussion on screening and assessment? All right, thank you. Next up, behavioral health. We have Cirilla and Judge Dolahanty today. So who will be taking the lead today? All right.
Well, good morning. You have the report. I had a PowerPoint, but it's on misdemeanors and infractions. So our work group, 3 basic goals, and we try to stress that with the work group every time we get together. The first is to help counties take a good look at their local practices and policies regarding the use of assessments for children, including diagnostic evaluation, psychological assessments. Number 2 is what we're moving into starting in November, and that is to explore how telehealth might help counties provide services, any mental health services to youth, including, back up to number 1, these psychological assessments and diagnostic evaluations. And then number 3, developing some way to put in place a multidisciplinary team to work with very high needs, high acuity youth, right? So those are the 3 things. To date, we focused on the first one. We're moving on to the second one soon. Before we do that, though, we anticipate having a guide, bench card, some title document that'll be directed mainly towards probation officers on one side, giving consideration to making a request for an evaluation or an assessment of youth. The other side being, if you are the judicial officer, referee, magistrate, judge, juvenile court that gets one of these requests, or some of the things you want to take a good hard look at before you make your decision, yes or no, on ordering that assessment or evaluation. So Anna Gowdy from Lawrence County has taken over the subgroup that's doing the card, whatever we want to call it, project, and she's done a great job, and we'll have that. Well, we've already sent it back. Nick and Mindy have been helping us as our staff people, and we have that at a nearly finalized draft status to hopefully bring to this group at the next meeting. We plan to present it to our entire work group in November, at the November meeting, and then bring it to the main group after that. We sent a version of it to the Juvenile Justice Improvement Committee through Office of Court Services, and they chewed it up, spit it back at us, and gave us some pretty healthy suggestions on where we might take a better look at it, or a different look at it. In November, we'll have some guest speakers to help introduce and bring everybody up to speed on the world of telehealth services. And then we'll review the card that Magistrate or Referee Gowdy will have put together for us at that meeting as well. The last big topic of our 3 goals is the multidisciplinary team approach for high acuity and high need youth. My preliminary thoughts are to steal largely from the dual status assessment team protocol that's already in place, and see if we can take some of the better working parts of that and apply it towards high acuity youth as well. We'll see. But that'll be one of our big tackles for 2025. There's other news from our work group. There's not other news from our work group? No.
If there was, what would it be? You have to wait about a month or 2 to find that out. Suspense.
That's my pass to you. So, my teammate.
My last day here will be January 3rd. Judge has been counting my days that I have left. So I don't have to do that. But I really enjoyed being a part of this. justice involvement is that's one of my dear passions for the work. And I really enjoyed having you.
Well, and I suggested to Cirilla a couple of things, one being that I agreed to be her co-chair, and then she takes a part. The second being, you're allowed to be retired and be a co-chair.
Oh,
Committees like
nice
this,
indeed.
and so I just throw both of those considerations, so, you know, we'll have some changes here, coming up with our particular work group, and have some big projects in store for us in 2025. Judge, thank you.
I have a question.
Nancy,
A question about your report. I'm super interested in the part about, there's some kind of federal requirement about an assessment for you discharging from juvenile detention. I didn't know.
So what we found out, and what CMS is doing, they're sending out their final decisions for states. And one of the final decisions from CMS is for states to implement an assessment for youth prior to them being discharged and 6 months to follow up.
This, can I interject?
Yes, please.
This may only be for youth who were on Medicaid and receiving services prior to going into the DOC to, you know, reset their treatment plans upon returning to the community.
Okay.
But we're also investigating whether or not this could be a more broader application. So we'll see.
So states just received that right when Keena announced it.
Okay.
So they still have to look at how that's gonna work, who is going to be able to do those assessments and the follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Is part of that the definition of detention? Because I know it says it's going to start with DOC, but then it's going to go to juvenile detention.
Would have been nice to know that. Say that out loud.
Well,
Like this,
I've
talking about
been
DOC
told
and
we're
detention.
not moving, so.
Well, I think there was the issue of the waiver for adults. So receive, yeah, that was proposed, I think, a couple of years ago for adults to be waived to receive service.
Okay.
They didn't have add-on kids to that.
Okay.
And that kind of. And now this is a new requirement for you.
Okay, and it doesn't, I just think it definitionally between a DOC facility and juvenile detention, they're separate.
I think they're working that out.
Okay, thank you. I love it. I mean, I love it for both.
CMS is handing down a lot of final decisions to be implemented within the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
this is a bit related, but perhaps off topic, but Cirilla, if this is too off topic for you today, that's fine. We'll look at a future meeting to present. But earlier this week, there was an announcement regarding a program for high acuity youth. Are you prepared to say a little bit about that so people are aware of what's coming?
Well, and I can start talking about that. I'm looking at Terry because we were talking about that to the meeting that, yes, there's a high acuity group that has been initiated, really to focus on how do we move system involved kids through the system. And that initiated out of the governor's office. And I think if you haven't seen the announcement about the recommendations about intensive foster care and programs for older youth, that was a part of all that planning. Cross-agency structure, knowing that we need to have more involvement from justice and DOC. And Terry, if you want to talk about your. Not really. Okay.
We're a part of it. We sit in meetings.
That's it. I think the other part that needs to be have more development, and you can hit me later. I would. Okay. Is currently the youth that rise up to the level to be referred are DCS involved.
Yes.
And that are staff. We've had a few, if they come through me, perhaps, because I tend to get more communication from probation, or judges asking me, what do I think? I would run up through that group to refer to be staffed. But there should be another mechanism that it should be coming from the correct path. So I think that's the work that still needs to be done, to have probation officers more aware of that and having a clear pathway for them to make referrals to be staffed.
That's so great.
So, Peyton, perhaps we can get that announcement regarding the high acuity program and send it out to this group. I think that might be helpful for everyone, just to be aware of what's coming. And I want to connect a couple of dots because I've heard connecting the models for high acuity and dual status youth. And I would submit that those are probably the same thing, often the same thing. When we have kids who are very high needs, they're touching both systems. So last week we heard from John Toole from the RFK Center at the Dual Status Summit, and he presented some information on several programs in Ohio. One of them just seemed intuitive to me, like maybe there's some legs to this idea, and that is choosing a subset of a population, of kids who are coming into the detention center who perhaps don't need to be coming into the detention center. Example, domestic violence charges. So brother hits brother, son hits mother, daughter hits father. Those sorts of situations. One community in Ohio contracted with someone to provide respite care in lieu of detention and to intervene with some case management services for those families and sort of solve the conflict resolution issue right out of the gate, as opposed to sending those kids to detention. And I think often our high need kids, our high acuity kids, sometimes that is hard. That is hard to parent a child who has a lot of needs. And so sometimes it's just a breath, a weekend to have a breather. And so part of the high acuity memo that went around talked about therapeutic foster care, highly trained foster families for these children, and also providing respite for those foster families who are caring for these children. So there's a recognition that this is just tremendously hard work to care for these kiddos who need a lot from us. And so connecting another dot, we've got youth service bureaus out there, and they presented to the Children's Commission regarding several programs that they have across the state. One of those is Safe Place, which is a place for a child to have safe housing overnight in an emergency situation. So I see all of these ideas floating around and all of these dots that we could perhaps put together. That was one reason why I thought it would be a good idea to connect David with the CJI. The other being that the youth service bureaus are very well versed in grant writing, and the grant formula allows administrative cost within the budget. And so since the youth service bureau is statewide, perhaps there's an avenue for trial judges to get grant writing assistance at the front end, in addition to partnership on some of these initiatives that are going well in other communities, like Safe Place, like IVAT, the Victims Assistance Program for trafficking victims, and also pretty robust truancy intervention programs in the southern part of the state. So as you hear of things like this, that we can perhaps connect the dots, connect to this funding source so that we can scale up the things that are going well in the state, I think that's where we see things really start to move. Cirilla?
I think it might be helpful if we invited Dr. Camille and David Reed / Sarah Sanders to this meeting, just to talk about that and the pathways and see where we would fit into that model.
Okay, can we look into that for next meeting? Thank you. All right, any other input regarding behavioral health? All right, diversion. Tracy?
Okay, our group last met September 25th, so we just met. And we were fortunate enough to have a presentation from Tippecanoe County Youth Services. And for those of you who don't know, that's Rebecca Humphrey. She is a force of nature, and Misty Robinson came down and presented to us about kind of how they're organized, what they do in the diversion space, and what they are doing with their 1359 grant, how they're expanding that. And it was just a wonderful presentation. They actually drove down to talk to us, which was great, and answered our millions of questions. Tippecanoe County is a little different, Judge Graham, because you have that county youth services system. So it's a little different. It's kind of nice that they're outside of, what we all do in the court system to make some decisions, but also they work really well in our county with everybody. So we just had a lot of questions and enjoyed hearing from them. They're obviously going to be on our directory, and they have agreed to talk to people we send their way about how they're organized and set up. So that was wonderful. Other than that, our smaller work group is still working very hard on the directory. That is a monumental task that I'm going to be doing for the next year or so. So we are just getting organized on how we're so happy that the court has agreed to house this directory for us. I think our first work group or workbook that we put on the YJOC has really helped, at least with it's stopped our questions. I know there might be further down the line technical questions, but I think it's at least given people a starting place for getting the grants and what they need to do. So hopefully this will help people in furthering and bettering their programs. And we are working on the spreadsheets and how we're organizing, trying to get all that information. And we may need help down the line from this larger group, but for now we are trying to get something that can be viable by like the beginning of the year. It may not be the best at that point, but that's the goal for now with our group. And we did set all our meetings for next year.
Great. Questions for Tracy regarding diversion? All right. Next up, transitional services. Terry, Magistrate Foley.
We have a tremendous group of people working with us, seriously. So we met September 5th. We are meeting again today after this meeting. We have two subgroups now. One of them is best practice. That committee is reaching out to other states and gathering information. That's been interesting because we have a lot of conversation about the differences in those states. So the other subcommittee, state agency collaboration, we met last week. Was that last week? I think it was. Okay. Anyway, we are moving. What a wonderful, we had a presentation from our transition coordinator supervisor for DOC. She is just amazing. We're trying to put together a Teams channel. We're looking at the legalities of that so that everybody can come together to one spot. We have this youth that has these issues, whether that's housing or whatever it is. So anyway, that was a great meeting. We're moving forward with that. Today we have a presentation from Office of Court Services about data as well. Let's see. The only person that may need to replace Chris Dixon, who was my assistant director, was promoted to warden at LaPorte. Well, he may resign today. I asked him, what do you do? So he's doing great. I was up there 2 days, yesterday and the day before. So Chris is doing great, and we will be replacing him. So we may do that on this committee as well. We have the presentation on the IAS reentry tool. I missed that, but I think that's it.
I would concur. We're gathering our information with the ultimate goal, I think, to try and put together some written documentation on. It's going to be difficult to say best practices because what we're finding is that there's not a lot of quote unquote evidence-based programming out there, but I think we'll find some commonalities between the transitional services programs that other states are already utilizing. So that's the goal.
Wonderful.
Speaking of the goal, what is the goal then? To come up with some draft legislation then relative to the transitional subcommittee? Is that essentially where we headed?
Right now, I think our goal is to, similar to what Diversion has put together, just some basic programming ideas for people. We already have some legislation on courts being able to reassume jurisdiction. So we're focusing more towards the programming aspect and how that may be best practice, for want of a better phrase, across the state for individual courts to utilize at their discretion.
So when we started this conversation, Judge King, there was not a whole lot of understanding about what's going on across the state. And so this group was partially tasked with figuring out what's going on, because we have a variety of different practices county to county. So in order to understand how to fix the problem, we've got to figure out, is there a problem? What's the scale of the problem? Are there areas of the state where things are going great? And can we replicate that in other counties that aren't going so well? So I think they've been really picking apart or dissecting the scope of the problem, and then we can figure out how to go forward after we've understood what the scope of the problem is. Is that a fair assessment?
I believe it is.
Good. Other questions regarding transitional services? Okay. All right, so now we'll move into the wrap up section of the agenda, and that is where we go around the table and I ask each of you to share agency initiatives, what's going on in your world, or if you have other dots that you would like to connect here today, by all means, I'd love to hear about those. So would you like me to start on the opposite table this time, Mark? Or are you ready to go first?
Go if you're amazing.
Go ahead.
So I think I shared plenty already. So main thing coming up, October 16, over here in the Government Center, next meeting of the Children's Commission. So we'll be giving a deeper dive on all that Best Youth Initiative stuff. If I talked too fast earlier for you, we'll also be starting our process of looking at key issues to watch during the legislative session. And I'll be making a pitch for some additional staffing with the commission to focus on engaging well with families and youth in our community and within all of our state agencies.
Jade?
I really do not have much else to add other than it is grant season, because a lot of our funding is federal, and the federal fiscal year starts 10/1. So we're gearing up and trying to get things executed.
We are hosting the what will be the last JDI Oversight conference in its current form. Not that we are divorcing ourselves from that event. We host it every 2 years, but in 2026, it will be a broader youth justice conference. And so we're still thinking about how the format of that might look. We might have a day on the front end or the back end with our JDI counties. But again, we have several counties that our office has been providing technical assistance to that are coming to this conference that are not JDI sites. And then again, looking forward to 2026, but the conference is October 29th and 30th in Fort Wayne. Many of you are already coming, but if anybody is not scheduled to come and wants to come, please let me know. We're happy to have you. The conference is free. There's no registration costs. We feed you during the conference, breakfast and lunch. You would have to get up to Fort Wayne and potentially stay overnight if you wanted to attend for both days. We're really thrilled with the lineup that we have in terms of the workshops. We have some national folks coming, talking about things that this group talks about all the time. So diversion, restorative justice, lots of work around behavioral health. Folks from Ripley County are coming to talk about their program. It's in Allen County. Allen County will be part of that presentation also. The lineup's great and we're super excited about it. So let me know if you want to attend and you haven't yet received registration information.
Well, this being my first meeting and my fourth week on the job, I don't have a lot to add. I am pleased to see so many IOCS staff here. So I know that we are a big supporter of this committee, and I look forward to learning more about IOCS's role in that moving forward. But I will say, Judge Graham, Bare Naked Ladies is the headliner for Toad the Wet Sprocket. So I will get to see them also in French Lick on Friday. I'll take some pictures.
Not too much to add. So a colleague of mine, Tamika Zipowski, she is a professor and she started a group called Youth Coalition. So they graduated their first group of 24 young people from Marion County from diverse communities, training them in research methods. They've come up with their own research projects around youth behavioral health. It's really wonderful, the topics that they're tackling. So she's starting another cohort up and just love the work at a state level, at a local level. Some really cool stuff happening.
So we're looking forward to the JDI Interstate Conference. I'm not going to be able to attend because I have to actually stay back and keep court rolling. But several of our other staff members are going. Insofar as locally, we are actually in process of putting together a truancy problem-solving court. So we've got the time broken out on our new court schedule that we just got approved for 2025. Got the PDs on board, and I think we're going to be ready to get started with that in January. And we're also in the process of meeting to come up with our own transitional services program in Allen County. So that's what's happening in my world.
Well, thank you, Judge Kenworthy, for talking about Billy Joel tickets being on sale. I now have mine. So excellent. My husband said, get on this right now. So thank you. And I was glad to hear that the youth services bureaus are being targeted for going after those grants, because I actually have a meeting with mine next week to talk about applying for grants. So I think that's good to get the word out there to them.
Wonderful.
I don't have a group to represent judges.
We've been looking through a lot of the new diploma requirements and the work-based learning that goes along with that. Kind of diving into some of the operational sides of it when it comes like insurance and liability and tracking those sides of it. Also working the attendance and chronic absenteeism and truancy issue, continuing to work on that. We met with the group and had our interview with the Best Youth Initiative on that, and that went well, and that was a good conversation. And we have our school safety academy coming up towards the end of October, and so we'll touch on a lot of these issues in there as well for our school personnel.
Okay, well, I think around the state, a lot of communities are experiencing an increase of youth with guns. It's unbelievable. We just did our first little handgun intervention program. We stole from Colorado. So if anybody wants information about that, we can share that. And it's causing lots of problems in finding secure detention beds. DOC, last time we were here, you were full with all your safekeepers. Is that still the case?
One bed at Lowe's.
Okay.
I have no girl beds.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And Tippecanoe County is still in the negotiation stage of possibly building a detention center. It'll only be 24 beds. So. And I found out there's nobody from DCS here today for some reason. I don't know why we're missing them, but yesterday I found out that we're on track for 13,000+ new CHINS filings this year, which was what we had in 2019. And it steadily dropped, and now we're on track for it jumping up a lot again.
How do I follow that? For anyone who has linkages to folks doing local work, who might need to know this, IHCDA just released in partnership with FSSA a new grant opportunity to provide short-term rapid housing rental assistance for families with children. Any nonprofit in the state can go after this. Oftentimes when we've had something like this, it's been really restricted. For the first time this time, we're able to open it up to anybody
meets that. Applications are due October 28th. So pretty quick here, if you need additional information, it's on IHCDA's public notices page or ask. It's up to 4 months of rentals. So it's a quick bid.
I have nothing, thank you. I don't have much, but I would echo the issue with children and guns and what to do about that. I'm in a adult criminal court now, and so all the teenagers I see, and I see a fair number, are kids that have been either waived or direct filed, and it's usually guns. That's mostly what I see.
I guess update as far as our rural judge, as far as from Ripley's, no, the jurisdiction of Ripley County, we do have our truancy program. Our folks have reached out to Mark and spoken with him and the people from, I guess, the federal government that are looking into the best practices. So I feel like that's a good thing. I guess Mark can tell me more. Maybe it went poorly, maybe it went well, that I don't know. Secondly, I guess as far as the SMART program, Nancy mentioned that as well. They're also presenting at the Oversight. So I feel like things are going well in Ripley County. I do have concerns though, as far as what's going on, as far as other rural jurisdictions not securing the grant funding. I guess that gives me heartburn, if you will. And I don't know exactly what those numbers are. I guess I had several questions for Jay or Devin or whomever, but I think what I did glean is perhaps the requests are even going down. Which then I guess brings us to the other issue as far as the funding formula. I think, Dana, you mentioned the funding formula. I don't know what that looks like. And I've always had, I think I've been here for about a year, and I think my first thought was, you know, as far as the funding goes for a diversion and the alternatives, that I didn't feel like it was going to make a difference and that people weren't going to reach out to try to secure those funds because the JDAI program was actually better. And I think that's probably what we're seeing. I mean, I think that's why a lot of folks have probably not reached out and asked for the funding available to ICJI. So that right there kind of kicks out two of the legs on the three-legged stool, only leaving the behavioral health. At least in my mind, and that's why we were able to secure. That was my thought from the outset, and continues to be my thought. And it kind of just leaves out one bucket of funding, and no one, and the rural judges or whomever, I don't think have maybe the ability or the, I think it was Devin's word, infrastructure to make that happen. And I don't know, I heard that perhaps the Youth Service Bureau might be the entity that could assist with that. But right now, I think we've just really reached a roadblock. Because, when I sit here, there's many different issues being discussed. And I think Magistrate Foley has a great, they're going to be able to resolve the transitional juvenile part, I don't have any questions about that. Dr. Alsma and his folks, the data issue, they're going to be able to take care of that issue. So there's several of these things that you can kind of check through. But then I hit grant funding and I hit the behavioral health, and I'm like, who's going to deal with this? Because I can, just from my broader perspective, I'm kind of looking at these things and thinking, they will be able to take care of this. This will get taken care of. But who's going to take care of the funding, and how are we going to provide the rural funding to the courts? And I think that the population says that 75 of the 92 counties are less than 100,000 people. So there's not a whole lot of services out there, and nobody's really trying to get a whole lot of services out there. And what do we need to do to make, because I think that's probably maybe the overarching issue of this board. At least from my perspective, that's why I feel like that's my interest, because how do we do that? How do we bridge that gap? And are we getting closer to bridging that gap? I don't know. Not if our requests are going down and none of the money's really gone out the door yet. I think I could probably take the argument that we're not getting what we want done. So that's my perspective as I sit here and look at things. I don't want to take the floor, but I was just kind of like, I've tried to, sit here and keep my mouth shut for the most part for a year, just so I have some idea of what the heck's going on. When you start on a board, you're kind of, I don't know. I'll ask a lot of questions like, but now that's where I'm at with it. And I think ultimately that's really what hopefully, we will come up with some sort of solution for that. Now I have, and I'm familiar with the behavioral health committee that was set up, and we went going from the community mental health centers and going over to the certified community behavioral health centers, and all this and all that, and it might happen in 3 years and this sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, that's a waiting game, and I also don't think those entities are focused solely on juvenile. Well, I know they're not. So, and I don't know if the funding will continue that we really need to help the juvenile population, with the emphasis on the rural juvenile population, which is what the legislation says. Is that going to happen? If it don't happen from this board, it's probably never going to happen, because you're never going to get the money appropriated. So to me, it's one heck of an opportunity, but I think it's slipping by.
So all hands on deck, all ideas welcome on this issue. We sort of marketed the grants, as we've always done, to criminal justice professionals, and thus the idea to flip the script and market it to the nonprofit agencies with statewide presence. So if there are other agencies like the YSBs that have presence across the state and could partner and help with this grant application process, let's do that. I suspect there may be an opening for me to talk about how this YJOC funding could supplement JDAI programming. Can't supplant it, but it can certainly supplement it at the summit later this month. And then it's looking at other ideas that are out there, other themes that are evolving, developing. Nicole, I took note of something that you said last week in the Dual Status Summit, and that was the crisis intervention teams from your community mental health centers. So each community has a CMHC, but how many of those focus on youth? How many of those are willing to focus on youth? So I think that's a question that perhaps we look at and work with our friends at DMHA to figure out how that could be scaled up, because Nicole, your indication was that that's a very effective
was actually
intervention.
Gross Nickel from.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were seated next to each other, weren't you? Yeah. So Whitley County, is that right, Lindsay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a session on that with Cirilla and Lindsay.
Excellent.
The Whitley County group at the
Excellent.
conference
Thank
also.
you. Thanks for correcting me, Nicole. So yeah, we're all hands on deck, all ideas. And again, it's often about connecting dots. So we have things that are working in pockets, but how do we translate those into a statewide policy, an organized policy, if that's the will of the group? So yeah, thank you, Judge King.
Man's opinion.
It's a good one.
And some of the things that I can highlight, one is, as Nancy mentioned, our mobile response stabilization services. We're working with the University of Connecticut and getting guidance in terms of the model. They've already put out and did a scan for the state, because we know that the needs of children and families are very different from adults. And so that mobile response has to be designed for youth and parents. And so we're in the beginning of stages of that. The adults arena already has mobile. We think we can kind of fold that under the Medicaid plan. We just are in the initial beginnings of getting that model in place. So I'm very excited for that. Nancy knows I've been pushing this for a very long time for us to have mobile response. One of the other things for CCBAC, they're required to have some level of crisis continuum, either respite stabilization, and those respite services for youth varies depending on that community mental health center, but they all will have to have some level of crisis services across the continuum, and that's a part of what Lindsay Potts, her team is doing with DMHA, is creating the crisis continuum for all ages. So now, as far as CCBHC, we did receive the SAMHSA award. It's supposed to start in January of the first of the year. What we don't know, as you were talking, we're working on a payment prospective service rate as opposed to just relying on Medicaid rehab option for reimbursement, to look at enhancing rates, so therefore the agencies can hire the appropriate level of professionals at a rate that is equitable. So that has worked in other states. And so right now we are looking at rates, working with Medicaid. We are looking at having a center of excellence for the state for EBPs and do fidelity monitoring, because that's another aspect. They are required to have an array of services for youth with people who specialize actually in serving kids. So, and we have listed a lot of the evidence-based programming. I make sure we got the EBPs in for youth as well. So you'll hear more about that. And so we're hoping if it's successful as we transition from payment structures, that we will be able to sustain that model with that. The other thing, Jay Chowdhury, if you don't know, our division director, his last day is going to be October 11th. And so we're expecting lots of shifting. We have our executive retreat will be tomorrow, so more news to come.
Thank you, Cirilla. Terry?
Wow, I just want to say nothing. But I won't. So as we talked about, the girl population in DOC has exploded. We are at 58 girls, which doesn't sound like a lot. But in a facility that should hold 40 and can hold 60, that will affect at some point diagnostics for girls, because we have to start making decisions now.
May I ask, does there seem to be like any particular crime, or would it do? Can you see what's boosting that, or?
I tell you that 98% of our girls are on a mental health roster. So, and therefore they tend to stay longer as well. So, I don't want to call it a crisis, even though we feel that. So we feel that pressure to do that. We're constantly changing. We're working on changing some policy. We worked with Dr. Dwinger and Dr. Falstad on a training for specific staff that were dealing with youth with high acuity needs. We are doing that now across the board for all of our staff, because it's everywhere. So a lot going on.
Thank you, Terry.
Terry, I had a question. As far as the folks or the juveniles that were placed in the DOC just solely for the purpose of getting the D&E, I think in 2021 it says that was 62, in 2022 it was 88. Do we know what that figure was in 2023 by chance?
No, but I can get it for you.
I think that's probably something you
Yeah.
would like to know, or at least I would like to know. I mean,
and
even talking about it might have made judicial officers say, hey, wait a minute, is this kid dangerous? Well, if no, then he shouldn't be going to prison to get a mental health assessment. I mean, I would think. Yeah. I mean, just a thought.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes if you provide the information to the people, they might be able to reach conclusions themselves and say, yeah, that's not appropriate.
Right. The other thing I would also talk about, which Judge Graham mentioned, is detention beds. wow. This last 2 weeks for us, the number of calls that I've received is amazing. We have reached out, my staff have reached out to all detention centers and asked, can you help at all? And most of them are full, or what is full based on the staff that they have to supervise kids. So never thought I'd see that either, but here we are. Henry County is moving forward with reopening their detention center. So I don't know the date for that. We've met with Tippecanoe. We've met with several counties, honestly, to talk about opening detention centers.
I think
That's
there
a sad day.
might be a couple of other counties in the state that are considering
They are. Yeah.
opening or refurbishing or doing something
Yes.
different, but my biggest worry is how in the heck am I going to staff a new detention center when I can't keep my intake center staffed?
Right.
I had to close down my third shift for 3 months because I didn't have staffing. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Bart down to start training people to come out.
Yeah.
Staffing is critical.
Yeah.
Or it is. So anyway. Just
Joel?
Well, my week has been dominated by high acuity youth as well. It feels like that's the trend. I had the honor of filing an appellant's brief for a girl Monday night, aligned with DCS, and then I'm working on an amicus brief on Chin 6 issues for the Supreme Court that's due tomorrow. So that's my contribution to the trenches, but related to trying to figure out bigger ideas and how to use this funding and try to fix the system. You know, I had a great conversation with Dr. Casey Peterson, who presented at our dual status training, and she really wants to figure out a way in which she can make more of herself to do reports and tap into the needs in rural Indiana and those places that need these services. And another doctor that I've been having conversations with, Dr. Russell Leday. If you don't know who that is, he's a psychiatrist in Indianapolis. He's developed an Empower Youth rehabilitative programming regiment. And so far, he hasn't been able to figure out how to tap into getting that into Indiana places, and is doing that work in Columbus, Ohio, despite the fact that he's here in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I have offered to try to promote him on our platform and to do a webinar and maybe even make it something like we just did with a cross-system stakeholder event to where anyone can sign up and see what, learn more about the program that he's built and look for opportunities for him to get into detention centers and other places that he can work on this rehabilitative programming. So I'll leave it at that. We've got a lot of work to do. And I think that there's opportunities out there. We just got to figure out how to make these connections.
Tracy?
All right. Thanks, Joel, by the way, for the dual status training. It was great. And I will second what Judge Kenworthy said. I really liked the idea of like having, we do a dual status designation, but then in some cases, I don't care. But frankly, really having, if you're looking at having that subgroup that you identify that makes sense to do something with, those kids that it is domestic, it is probably kids that are high acuity, and having a quicker connection, offloading that from the courts and back into the social services realm where it really belongs and where you can help the family. Wow, it just completely makes sense to really focus whatever you're looking at. I mean, I think there's other designations too of subgroups, but I thought that made a lot of sense. What else? I'm looking forward to the JDAI conference. This is the first year IPAC will be there as part of the executive committee. So we get a little group. That's going to be fun, and I'm really looking forward to that. IPAC's working on our winter conference, which is our biggest training for prosecutors around the state. So I'm working on that. And I did want to point out that our status subcommittee under the commission's Juvenile Justice Task Force just met and had a presentation from Kathy Danilick, who's the state attendance officer. And we really enjoyed hearing from her. And also she brought some Warren Township people that were kind of best practice pointing out. And so I thought that went really well with our group and made some connections right away with even some people that were on my status fund subcommittee who were getting together with Warren Township right after to work on some things. So I think we're all working pretty hard on some of these issues. Thanks.
I will share just one final thing, and that is that 2 weeks ago, Cirilla and I went to Hartford, Connecticut, and spent time at the Council of State Governments Adolescent Behavioral Mental Health Policy Academy. I think they needed a few more words in the title of the event. But they gave multiple presentations throughout the week that I thought would be good ideas for Indiana to look more at and to research a little bit. The audience was really interesting too. So about half a dozen judicial officers from across the country, half a dozen or so executive personnel from across the country, and then 20 or so legislators from across the country. And many of those legislators were psychiatrists, social workers, police officers. They were people who really know our youth. And so there are some great ideas and great initiatives going on out there. For example, suicide prevention programming in several of the states. One unique, I think, way of attacking that program, Utah talked about a public media campaign regarding safe firearm storage. So a message, children talking as if they're talking to their parents, saying, did you know that when youth commit suicide, the effective, 90% of firearm attempts are effective, but other methods are not. And typically when they're effective, it's with your gun. I mean, it's a really well done 1 or 2 minute PSA that they put out. And I think also we don't have adults thinking about safe storage in the other aspect, and that is kids are using these guns not only on themselves, but on other youth. And kids are concerned when they go to school about being safe at school. So another idea, another avenue of attacking some of the gun violence may just be prevention. So should we look at prevention strategies for that? Another topic that they spent a significant amount of time on was workforce strategies, recognizing that we have workforce shortage across the board in many venues and many different types of settings. And interstate compacts was one topic that I wonder, does Indiana have all of the compacts for social workers, for counselors, for psychiatrists, for psychologists? And one counselor / legislator in the room explained, and I think this was really helpful for me to think about, that it's not just about having a counselor, giving the counselor the ability to move across state lines and immediately start working in the neighboring state, or moving from college graduation immediately into a practice in another state. It's also about the fact that there may be a counselor sitting in Idaho with an 11 o'clock opening on her calendar, but maybe, there's no one available to fill that opening. And she specializes in eating disorders or something like that. And there may be a youth or an adult 2 states over that needs that particular specialty and doesn't have it in their area, but they can do that 11 o'clock time slot. So it's about also not just increasing the number, but increasing the right match of services. And that made perfect sense to me and not something that I thought about before. Another workforce strategy that I think dovetails with something I heard from a youth at Voices. They indicated, this particular sophomore girl said, we see student teachers in our classrooms. We have a program for student teaching. Why don't we have peer counselors? And so there are other states, Texas, Utah, Wisconsin, who presented information at this conference regarding one I think is called Team Hope. They have a lifesaver logo that they've put together of peer counselor programming that has been very effective. We also hear from our youth that they're more apt to talk to their friends than they are to any adult. And so often the path to help starts with a particular counselor. A really interesting tidbit that I found from one of these programs was that at the beginning of the school year, they survey the class of students and they say to the students, if you, Dr. Alsma, were feeling suicidal, or if you were having a really rough day, who in your class would you want to talk to about that? And so the students identify who in their class seems to be mature, available, empathetic, able to help them. And then they reach out to that subset of the student body and they say, would you be interested in joining our Team Hope? So kids in our high schools, kids in our colleges now are acutely aware of mental health crisis. I've been on 3 traveling oral arguments this past month in September, 1 to DePaul University, 1 to Arsenal Tech High School, and 1 to Pike High School. And after the oral argument is finished, we give the students the opportunity to ask us questions about anything except the case. And every one of those settings, a student asked, judges hear a lot of really terrible things. How does that affect your mental health? How do you take care of your mental health? 3 times in the month of September, students asked us that question. So we have kids who are aware and we have kids who care about what's going on with their peers. So our workforce may be short now, but in 4 years and 8 years, our workforce may be full up with people who are really interested in helping and in joining the helping profession. So I saw a really silver lining in all of that coming together. So that's my 2 cents from Hartford, Connecticut, and I'll be talking to Mark more about looking into specific programming. Anything else for the good of the group today? All right, then we are adjourned a few minutes early.
When was
Thank you,
that
everyone.
concert?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. We might be out of luck.
French lady.
Lunch is out on the table if you ordered a lunch. Grab it and let's break bread.
Did you grab orange here?
Did.
I mean, I like that. I wouldn't have.